This program is showing you how to use functions, pass parameters back and forth. This program also uses an array. So, what is a function and how do you use it? In this code here, the first chunk where the def statement is the function. Although it is first thing that you see in this program, the computer will actually ignore it until it's called later on in the program. So calling a function happens later on, but all the functions are defined at the beginning of the program. So that's why the def command tells you I'm defining a written function by me, and therefore the indents say this is where this function is defined. You may define more than one function at the beginning of a program. It doesn't have to be one, it may be many. So calling the function happens in the program. So you can see down here in line 18 where I've got calcav because that's the name of the function. This is where it's called. So it's not until line 18 of the program will the computer go back and look for that function and do that function. Now there's also a bracket. So you may get calling a function with empty brackets. There'll always be brackets for a function, but they may be empty. They're not passing anything to it. In this instance, I'm calling the calculated average function and sending it two variables that have been calculated in the main program. So that's why there's two variables listed inside of the brackets. So the first one listed here when I call it goes to the first variable listed when it was defined. So this list variable here will go up there and become a list in the other one. It does not have to be the same. It is even better if you do not have it the same. The number of students will be sent up there and they'll be used as the variable size in the function. So you can see here in the function, list is used as an array, but is used as a function within that. Here we have the results being returned. So at the end of the function, if you want to get results back to the main program, you need to return a variable. So here when I've called a variable, here in this Python, we are looking at using functions. Functions are many parts of programs, a program within its own right that is used within other programs. So here at the beginning of this program is a section of the program where we've defined the function. So we've used command def for define. We've given it a name of calc average. And for this one, it uses two parameters or two variables that are passed to it at the time of running. You can have as many variables as you want, or you can have none. The defined function will always have the brackets. There's no parameters or no variables to be passed to it. It'll be simply just empty brackets. So that is ignored by the computer when it runs. They always define at the beginning, the front of a function of programs. You may have many of them. You may have one or you may have none, but they're ignored until they're called. Calling a function happens sometime in the main program. So here we can see the main program starts at 13. And it's not until line 18 where do we use the calc average and send it two variables. So there's simply in here, it is saying go and do the function called calc average and send it a variable from this main program called list, and that'll become the variable in the function called list. And also it says here send the number of students variable, but that'll become the variable called size in the function. So for the term of that function, the variables will be assigned from when they are called. In here you can see how that works. So here we have a list, and in the program is used list. List is an array. It's sent there as an array, so it will be an array in the program, in the function. Size is used in there to calculate how many students there were. So that variable was passed to it, so it can be used there. It doesn't have to be set within the function. At the bottom of this function, it has the command return and a returning result. Result is a calculated variable from within that function. It returns it back down to the bottom where it was originally called. In this instance, it said student average equals calculated average. So this is where it turns the value to, so we can get out the calculated value from the function that we want to use it for. So functions are the beginning of the program, but they do not run first. They're not run until they are called by the program. So the first actual line of this program is where we're setting a variable as an array. So we're calculating, or we're setting list to be an array. It's empty at the moment, but we just defined it as an array. The second line, which is line 14, we're setting the number of students, how many students we're going to calculate the average for, as an integer as input by the user. So notice we've got integer there because we want an integer for the numbers of students. Line 15, we're setting a loop now, a defined count loop, a for loop, and it's going to do it from a range of 0 to whatever the number of students that you entered. So that will do, if you've said 10 students, it will go and do it for 10 students. So it's going to do this 10 times, and it quite simply now is asking data entry equals the float, so a decimal point because these are marks, and an input given by the user. So it's going to do this for that however many that you've asked it to do. Okay, and it's going to append that to the variable called list. So a list will be holding each individual score as you enter it for each student. So it's simply going to go and add every time you enter something on to the next character, the next, position, next index in the variable. Now we get to the point where it calls the function. So it's got a student average, and I want that to equal whatever is returned from the function called calculated average. It's going to send it the variables that have been calculated in this main body, list and number of students. So that's called passing the array. So now we go up to the function. So we're having a look here. The first thing it says, okay, I've passed it two variables, list and size. So it sets a new variable. This variable is only used in this function. Total does not exist as a variable in the main program. Its life cycle is only within this function. We set it at 0. Line 8, we're having a look here. We're setting a range. We want to do this for a number from 0 to whatever the size was. And the size was passed from the call, and is the number of students. The size will equal whatever was entered for the number of students. And the next line here is going to say total equals total plus whatever the index of the list is. So if this is the first time round, it's indexed to 0, so the first thing entered into the list, the first item in list is added to total. So total was 0, so it'll be that plus that. And it goes through because it knows what list is, because list was sent to it when the parameters was passed, calling the function. The next, it does the calculation. It's simply the result equals whatever the total score is divided by the size of the class or the count of the students. And then lastly, it returns the result. So it says, I've calculated that. That's it. I'm finished with this this function. Send that array back, or send that function back. And the last line, it prints the student average is whatever the student average, because that was what was returned. Now, in this array, there's a few things that could be fixed up. One of the good practices to use is to, just like we use camel case or some sort of way to recognize variable names, you'll notice that the function name looks very much like a variable name. It's good practice to put my, and that defines it as me. It calculates as human, say this is a function that the owner or the person writing the program has calculated. So putting my underscore means that it's instantly recognizable as a function that has been written by the programmer and is not some inbuilt or some variable. So it's nice to do that. You may use FN for function or F underscore, something to indicate that where they all are. Another thing here is the variable name list doesn't really tell me what it is. You should think about changing this to student scores list. So therefore it's obvious what it is going. I'll leave the list variable for use in the function because they're short-term variables. They're the changes I would make.